Hello and welcome back. This is part whatever of why I hated the Wheel of Time books. Sorry, my voice is going today because hay fever from hell. So hello. Where do we start? So The Great Hunt is book 2. I will say this about book 2. The writing was more concise. It was better world building, I will say that. Characterization still felt like it was ripped out of a D&D game. So, what did I like? I did think the improvement in the writing did give a better story. The flow was better, it was a little bit more concise, and I actually thought things were going to go really well with this. The problem is I still couldn't care about any of these characters, their motivations, the story. I couldn't care about anything because the characters, to me, and this is just a personal thing, felt very one-dimensional. It just frustrated me still. There was a lot of really good ideas, but nothing seemed to be executed in any particularly great fashion. There was lots of potential, but that was it. Where else do we start? The writing was still all over the place, very inconsistent. I don't know if that was down to the writer, but it may have been the editor, because again, there's a lot of cooks in a kitchen when it comes to a novel. I will say that. So I can't put the blame on anyone in particular, but given the era it was written, it was probably quite rushly edited just because of fantasy at the time and so on. It still felt like Lord of the Rings fan fiction in the sense that there was no, it still didn't feel completely original. I did like the Arthurian Legends stuff that creeps in. I'm a King Arthur geek. I've studied the myths of the British Isles. But again, it just felt like, let's just use this because it's cool rather than having any actual depth. There were still story cues and story beats from Lord of the Rings and other fantasy novels of that ilk, and I love Lord of the Rings. And that's where it kind of starts to fall apart even more. It's a slow book. I've read people call Lord of the Rings a slow book, but at least in Lord of the Rings, there's something to keep you interested. In its slower sections, there is still something there that keeps you into it. This doesn't have it. The information dumping is still annoying, and information dumps are not world building. I'm sorry, but they're not. And it just ended up feeling just boring and dry and uninteresting. And it just, the first half of the book was actually really enjoyable and I was getting into it. Despite its flaws, I was beginning to get into it. And then the second half happened and I died a little. It ended up dragging to the point that by the time I got to the end, I felt like I don't care about any of this. I didn't care about the characters, and also sudden tonal shifts as well, which I found just really off-putting and strange. It didn't flow, it felt like a different book, and that's something that really annoyed me. It felt like I was reading a different book or something that had been edited by a different person. And it didn't quite, the first half was beginning to grab me, and then it just went wrong. And I'm like, how did that happen? This book had potential. It was better than the first one, definitely. But it wasn't a good book overall. Again, it suffers from feeling like the Shannara Chronicles, and the Shannara Chronicles are hot garbage. And that's something else. There was obviously the Terry Brooks influence. And Terry Brooks, I'm sorry, he can't write. To me, anyway. These are all personal opinions, and my opinions are completely subjective, so he can't bloody write. It just ended up frustrating me because I was like, I get what you're trying to do with this, Jordan, but there's no... It didn't work. And it fell apart, especially towards the end. It just felt disjointed and all over the place, and I could rant about that. I will give him credit with this one, though. The world, like I said at the start, the world building definitely was a step up. It didn't feel so just dumped on you. It felt more natural. It flowed better. That was fine. Again, it just didn't do anything. And all that good work at the beginning fell apart towards the second half in the end. Story structure was your typical fantasy story, so there's no point talking about that. If you've read one, you've read them all in that sense. Originality is something that I do look for in fantasy, and the problem is Tolkien inspired so much. It was amazing. Yet the problem with it is that a lot of people just wrote Lord of the Rings fanfiction. And this is basically a post-apocalyptic Arthurian Lord of the Rings fanfic that did nothing new, nothing original, nothing interesting. That's my opinion on the book. I'm sorry if you... Well, actually, I'm not sorry if you guys find that offensive. I'm just being honest. There's going to be a couple more of these, so if you're watching this series, please tell me what you think in the comments as always, and I will talk to you later.